Ladies and gentlemen, quick introduction. This is Ari Cohn, First Amendment attorney out of Chicago, Illinois. He's now been practicing now for, I think, a decade, working in... time flies when you're having fun, huh?
Something like that.
Yeah. I know I found you through your work with the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, where you were director for the Individual Rights Defense Program. That's a lot of work with respect to kind of guaranteeing students' rights on college campuses, in particular free expression on college campuses, which I know was and is still a hot button issue. Although, of course,
always will be.
Right. He's been on Tucker Carlson's program. He's done the Rubin Report, among others, and he is a real top-tier tweeter. I see him call somebody a moron or a fucking moron at least once a day on Twitter, and it's always a real trip. So, but that being said, he posts a lot of good stuff, a lot of good content. My favorite today was when he... I'm curious what you thought of the hearings today. Senator Marsha Blackburn asked if a Google engineer, she asked the CEO of Google if a Google engineer who criticized her still has a job, in a real example of cancel culture, and he went off on that, so I really appreciated that. Oh my goodness, so how are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, actually, I declined to watch the hearing live today. I A, have other things to do, and B, decided that I just didn't need my heart rate going up at that early point in the morning. But I did see a lot of it afterwards, and I did read what happened, and as everyone expected, it was a complete embarrassment for our country. But
you know,
you could call that another day at the Senate.
Well, let me ask you something about this. All right. The term that has gone around so much over the last couple of weeks with respect to these social media platforms is the public square, right? The public square. These are the new public square. And you know, I mean, is it really so insane an idea? I mean, I know, for example, that the Supreme Court in 1980 in a case called Pruneyard Shopping Center v. Robbins affirmed a decision of the California Supreme Court and conclude that a state can, if it chooses, prohibit the private owner of a shopping center from using state trespass law to exclude peaceful expressive activity in the open areas of a shopping center, a private property, a mall, right? I mean, isn't that basically what these Republicans who are crying out about social media censorship want to do? They want to take that kind of standard and apply it to Facebook and Twitter and, you know, all the other platforms. Is it really so crazy?
Yeah, it is kind of that crazy. And, you know, Pruneyard, for what it's worth, excuse me, is an aberration, wrongly decided, in my opinion, and also just completely inapplicable. People also try to cite to Marsh v. Alabama, which is a case where the Supreme Court held that a company town, basically back in the day when workers lived in this company town, they shopped in the stores, the whole thing was the municipality was owned by the company. And a court held that because that company had taken the role of traditional public government functions, that they could be held to First Amendment standards. And people have shouted up and down about Marsh v. Alabama. Of course, that argument is similarly absurd and has been rejected by the courts. First of all, primarily because I don't really know what government function Twitter and Facebook and such are providing, and Lord, I hope they aren't, because we're all in a lot more trouble than we thought. You know, what it comes down to is public square, at least in First Amendment language, has a pretty specific meaning. It kind of goes along with public forum, and I won't get bogged down in forum analysis, sure. But things like parks and streets and areas that are for the public, owned by the government is very restricted in what speech regulations it can enact. And the difference is that Twitter might have some characteristic of what a public forum is. It is a place where the public does come to express itself, but it's still private property. It's still private property, just like your living room is private property. And just because you invited a bunch of friends over to chat about your love for X candidate doesn't mean I can come in and start talking about bananas at the top of my lungs and expect you to not be able to throw me out.
Well, you know, I guess this is where I'm curious about the analysis here. If you imagine, I guess to throw out a hypothetical here, if you imagine a town in which there are no parks, it's libertarian paradise where there are no public sidewalks or roads, everything's privately owned, you pay your toll to use it. In that sort of a world, yeah, you still have a First Amendment that protects you from government intrusion on your speech. But if you have no public property to speak on, I guess I think the feeling is that in such a scenario, you may have your legal First Amendment rights, but you don't have any meaningful way to exercise them. And I think that's the analogy that people draw with Twitter, where sure, you can build your own website, you can build your own Twitter, but let's be practical here. What that means in practice is that most people speak at the whim of these large multinational corporations, and that's basically it.
But that's not true, because there's a whole bunch of social media companies out there, including a bunch of upstarts that aren't giant multinational corporations, and there are other options. And yeah, you might not like that you have a more limited reach, but the fact of the matter is that's the marketplace, and that is market forces doing what they do. And I'll betray myself as kind of a libertarian, but this is free speech is inherently a kind of an exercise, a free market exercise. Some ideas win, some ideas lose. The marketplace decides which ideas we like and which ideas we make fun of and ostracize the people who hold them. And it's the same thing with these social media platforms. And I guess I'll get us into Section 230 here. That law that allows different platforms to have different content moderation policies and decision making is exactly a market-based solution. If you don't like what Twitter is doing with content moderation, you can go to Facebook, or you can go to Parler, or you can go to Gab, or you can go to any of these other places, as ridiculous as some of them are. Don't laugh at Gab.
Are you telling me to go to Gab? I gotta go hang out with all the Nazis if I want to get if I want to post on the internet now? I mean, you may as well just be taking my First Amendment rights away from me.
But that's the thing is, Twitter runs a company. They're first and foremost a private enterprise, and they are there to make money. And they have an obligation to their shareholders to make money and to do the things and enact the policies that allow them to make money and make money for their shareholders. And the fact of the matter is, sure, like it might be a place where you express yourself, but at the end of the day, that's not what Twitter is in it for. Twitter isn't in it to give you a place to speak your mind. Twitter is in it for a paycheck, and that's fine. That's how it is, and that's why we have alternative. That's why we have parks that we can go speak our minds in. That's why we have streets we can protest in. That's the fact of the matter is these social media companies, they're going to come and go. Nobody thought MySpace would ever go to the way of the dodo bird.
That's true.
And that's another thing that Section 230 does is Section 230 protects the ability of upstarts to compete and actually topple the big players. You think about what would happen if social media companies had to bear the regulatory expense of looking at every single thing that's posted and taking it down, or simply just, not moderating anything. You price startups out of the market. No startup has the resources to adequately deal with that kind of potential liability.
This is something I'm curious about since you mentioned that is last week we talked to Shoshana Weissman about this issue, and she said something that I hadn't thought about before, and I'm curious what you think about this.
She says a lot of things that I don't think about. Bless her soul, I love her dearly.
Yeah. I'm curious. So I'm curious what you think about this notion that basically when Facebook says, "Hey, we want some regulations," they actually may not be opposed to certain regulations that would seem to be antithetical to their business, because what they would do is, they would make it harder for Facebook to do business, but they would absolutely crush any potential opposition. right?
I mean, that's what regulation is generally. Big business loves regulation because big business has the influence, the power, and the money to help write the regulations and write them in a way that hamstrings their competition. That's the whole problem with regulation, is that the people who help write it are the people with a vested interest in using it to knock out their competitors. She's exactly right when she says that.
Well, as somebody who has used regulation to help knock out a competitor in the past in the energy business, let me pose an alternative to you here. That I've seen proposed. In my business, we have, in what, the 1880s, people didn't like the fact that there were 27 sets of power lines, and so they formed monopoly utilities. I guess, it's possible to imagine a situation, that for technical reasons they were monopolies. I suppose it's possible to imagine several different utilities, and people have said the same thing with respect to social media. Hey, look, I know Will Chamberlain of Human Events has said, nationalize Twitter, right? Turn these
socialist thing to say.
Yeah, I know, real socialist for right winger, right? Then nothing means anything anymore, I guess. But just form turn it into a utility, right? If you're right, profit motive is their paramount goal. But if the public's interest is in a platform to speak, what's so wrong about assuming the federal government offers them fair market value and all that? What would be so bad about turning them into a regulated utility type entity where everybody gets a guaranteed place to speak?
Here's the thing. Profit motive might be their driver, but they're not making the profit off charging users. And that's one of the main justifications for regulating utilities, is to make sure they're not price gouging the end users. Yeah. Not only that, but Twitter, I'm sorry, no matter how you look at it, is not a natural monopoly. The existence of Facebook disproves that it is a natural monopoly. The justifications for regulating something as a utility just aren't there. And people can, scream it up and down, and they might want it to be so. But the fact of the matter is, if any particular thing that we all use, once it becomes big enough, can be declared a monopoly, or to be declared a utility, then everything's a utility. I mean, is Walmart a utility?
Well, I mean, if I guess would it be, as somebody who's got a lot of experience in this field, do you think there would be any problems with the government saying, here's a generic government social media platform that you can never get banned from, I guess? I mean, if
the government wants to do that, yeah. I think I would oppose the amount of money the government would eventually end up spending on such a thing. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah. If the government wants to offer a social media website, for sure the First Amendment is going to restrict what it can and can't moderate people for and ban people for. Yeah. And if it wants to offer that, the government is absolutely free to do that. And I think, oh God, what's his face? The guy who claims, who created email, who's run for Senate unsuccessfully in Virginia a bunch of times, Shiva something or another.
Oh, yeah, I wish I knew.
Has basically proposed that. And in and of itself, that's not an offensive idea. The government can compete in the marketplace with Facebook and Twitter and Parler and all that stuff. That's, if the government wants to do that, I think it would be just hilariously terrible. But at the same time, sure, they can do that, just like they can, create a new park in which, expression can happen, and they can't do anything about it because they just opened a public forum.
There's a channel here on Twitch called U.S. Army Esports, and they were trying to, I don't know if you've heard about this. Okay, so you've heard about this, where now basically these people are trying to play video games and talk about, hey, have you considered the Army? And it's just spam 24/7. War criminal, war criminal, war criminal, war criminal. And at first they tried banning this stuff, but you can't do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, when the government opens a place for people to talk about things, it's, they do so at their own peril, basically.
Section 230 is understandably, really at the core of the current dispute over moderation of platforms. And I know a lot of conservatives lately have felt like, especially in the wake of Twitter's decision to, depending on your perspective, hide the truth about Hunter Biden or suppress a story whose credibility is still in question. In any event, their decision to just cut off the sharing of certain hyperlinks and things like that has really made people on the right cry out against this Section 230 distinction of platforms and publishers. And
I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay.
There is no such distinction in the law.
Well, now
that's kind of how this all started.
Yeah, I mean, I hear all the time though. Hey, they're not a platform anymore, Bastiat. This is they've given it up.
But that's not what the law says. The law says that interactive computer services and users of interactive computer services, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute,
sure,
are not considered the publishers of third-party created content, user-generated content, or anything of the like. That's it. There is no you must be neutral in order to not be considered the publisher. The law simply says they are not the publisher, and that's exactly what was intended. The Senators Wyden and Cox have confirmed, they wrote the law, that this is exactly what they intended, because that allows different websites to have different policies that are responsive to their customers, to their users, and they can compete with other websites, and that's what allowed the internet to grow. That's what allowed the internet to really take advantage of the communicative aspects and without really running into these issues of extreme liability. There is no publisher platform distinction. The word platform doesn't appear in Section 230, and it's just not. The thing that's frustrating about this is that you have people who know better. You have the Ted Cruzes, you have the Josh Hawleys. These are people who are not stupid. I mean, they do stupid things, but they are not stupid people. And they are, even worse, they are deliberately lying to people and misleading people and using this language that talks about Section 230 in the way they wish it had been written, but that it is not. If they want to advocate to change Section 230, that is one thing. Reasonable minds can disagree. And if you say, hey, I think this law is bullshit and I want to change it, I'd say, I think you're wrong, but make your argument. Yeah. But what you can't do is, in service of trying to change the law, tell people that the law is something that it isn't. That's dishonest. And, big surprise, senators being dishonest to people, but it's really it's galling. These are both lawyers, the two biggest purveyors of misinformation about Section 230. They're
constitutional lawyers.
They fucking baffling. But the thing that I want people to also realize is the provision that protects users also. It's interactive computer services and users of interactive computer services. People don't realize you hit that retweet button, even if it's not something you wrote it, without Section 230, if that thing that you just retweeted is defamatory, guess what? You just republished it. And without Section 230, you might be on the hook for that. There are all these parts of Section 230 that protect people. They're protecting the moderators. You own a church Facebook page for your church. Somebody comes in and starts posting things about Satanism or whatever, something that clearly the church would not be happy about. Well, if you delete those comments and you ban those people, I mean, if without Section 230, the pastor of that church who runs the page could be liable for other things posted on that page that might be defamatory or otherwise lead to some kind of liability. And I don't think that's the world we want, where you can't set up a website for a particular purpose and keep it to that purpose and keep out the trolls. And if people want to troll on the internet, go to fucking 4chan. Like, what's the big deal? Like, oh, I'm sorry, you're mad that you can't troll the entire whole wide world on somebody else's dime? Fuck you. Like, that's stupid.
Yeah, I mean,
and I get the frustrations. I get the frustrations. Although, to be fair, you see all the top-rated Instagram or Facebook and Twitter pages, and they're all fucking conservatives.
Yeah,
so,
like 8 out of 10 of them are Dan Bongino.
But right. But I can get the frustration at points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that social media companies always do a great job. Content moderation is very difficult. It's very labor intensive. When you try to automate it, things go horribly wrong, as Facebook has learned.
Yeah.
I mean, Facebook blocking images that journalists take of human rights abuses. You try and automate this shit and things go wrong. But then again, to hire enough people to do this at scale, it's a huge undertaking. So there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be fuck ups. And to some extent, I do have a little bit of sympathy, not to be an apologist or anything, but because it's a hard job. And the people who do the content moderation job are overwhelmingly beset by PTSD because of all the shit they have to do.
Oh my God, yeah, I have heard there is so much violence and child pornography and crazy stuff.
The stuff you in a million years would never look at for a split second.
Yeah.
These people have to sit here and troll through all day long. I can't imagine doing that.
I know. And it's crazy because it feels like I've heard that there's this interregnum right now between the ability to perfectly moderate it, automatically with an automated system, and then I guess the past where they did basically nothing. Now in the meantime, they're trying to do it all with human beings and imperfect algorithms.
Comes at a huge cost.
Yeah, and I think because they know that eventually the people are going to be phased out of the process, I think they're less interested in trying to protect them. So they're in a miserable position.
But here's the thing: a law like Section 230, allows for them to make these mistakes, but also gives them incentive to be responsive to their user base when they make mistakes. If enough people say, hey, Twitter, hey, Facebook, you're really fucking this up, and we're going to leave and do something else, they're going to respond. Yeah. And to some extent, in a lot of ways, these companies actually have responded to public pressure, and maybe not in the ways that everybody would like. But the whole point is that it gives them the market forces to respond to. And it gives them the possibility of competition. I mean, let's be honest. If enough people really hated how Twitter was doing things, they could all go to Parler, and Parler could take off. The fact of the matter is, just because they're too lazy to do that, or they don't want to do it because they don't, want to miss out on trolling their favorite CNN reporter or something, that's not Twitter's problem. That's a you problem. It's
let me ask you, I guess, two questions on that. First of all, I know a lot of proposals have been thrown out for reforming or changing Section 230. Do you think in your opinion, are there any parts of it that should be changed, or is it works fine as it is?
I mean, if I would change anything, I would insert maybe a section that says, "You big fucking idiots. The law does what it's supposed to do. Please stop trying to mess with it." The problem with all the proposals to quote unquote reform Section 230 is that it is very apparent that none of the people who wrote them understand how Section 230 works. They haven't read the case law. They haven't really just actually bothered to educate themselves. What they're doing is they're just using it as a wedge. They're using it for notoriety to gain some kind of populism points. There's no real interest in fixing things. But still worse, another way that they're lying to these people is they think reforming Section 230 is going to meaningfully force social media companies' hands. But the thing of it is, Twitter, Facebook, they have a First Amendment right to moderate content. You can make them liable till the cows come home for defamation for what people post, but they have a First Amendment right to remove the content, ban the people that they don't want on their platforms. And nothing about reforming Section 230 will change that. So really, what people are trying to do is use Section 230 reform as a way to punish social media companies for exercising First Amendment rights. Surely, the government doesn't have to offer immunity to anyone. That's not a question. But the fact of the matter is, if it's not aimed at fixing the problem, which it can't be because social media companies can do this without Section 230, then the entire reason you're doing it is to punish them. I find that pretty troubling, to try and wield legislative processes to increase somebody's liability as a way of punishing them for exercising a First Amendment right. And the fact of the matter is, people might say, oh, well, it will make them more careful about it because they want to avoid that liability. But the fact of the matter is, no, it probably won't. They're just going to remove more stuff out of an abundance of.
Yeah, like it seems like, for example, political content compared to, say, I guess like gaming or just kind of shock humor or, whatever, the videos on YouTube, they do really well, like then score millions and millions of reliable views, right? Political content usually isn't like in that top tier. It's a little lower, right? And then on Twitch, it's even lower. And what it seems like to me is that if ever, I'm curious if this is your conclusion as well, if ever they really got their wish and Section 230 was gone, then it would just be all, traditional amusements. Like there would be, political content would just be gone because it's too risky by comparison,
It would probably, so one of two things will happen. Either it would be that, or you would be lost in a sea of never-ending nonsense because they say, okay, we're not going to moderate anything. Somebody wants to post your grandmother's home address on our platform. Sorry, we can't take it down. Too bad that there's pitchforks and torches outside Granny's condo. Tough shit. I don't think that's the world anybody wants to live in either, to be totally honest. It's people really... But we live in times where everything is remarkably stupid. And
what do you mean by that? That's a phrase.
If you looked around you, everything is fucking dumb. Literally everything. I'm dumb. You're dumb. We're all dumb.
Well,
we're getting dumber. Unfortunately,
it does seem like I'm the reason this isn't even a First Amendment thing. The reason I'm curious about this though is, sometimes I'll watch like a Senate debate of like the past, like 30 or 50 years ago. And, assuming they're not talking about issues that involve basically the discriminatory biases of the past, people do seem a lot more eloquent, a lot more thoughtful and poised. And I guess compared to watching Josh Hawley lie about Section 230 in a way that is neither truthful nor eloquent.
I mean, we live in reality TV now. That's the thing. I blame whoever keeps greenlighting Survivor, personally. But, it's just, we live in a time where trolling is worth more than legitimate policy proposal and where the hot take is more valuable than insightful analysis. And, it's unfortunate, but that's the reality we find ourselves in. And that's why we have the situation where people are screaming all kinds of nonsense about Section 230, not really understanding what they're saying. My favorite is these congressional candidates who keep trying to suck up to Donald Trump by commenting about everything he writes about Section 230. And I remember they got mad because there was a hashtag trending where it was when Trump was diagnosed with coronavirus, I think, and it was wishing for Trump's death, or I forget what it was. There was a hashtag, and people were wishing ill upon Donald Trump. And these congressional candidates are sitting here saying, how dare Twitter let this trend? This is inappropriate. And then in the same tweet saying, abolish Section 230. But what these fucking idiots don't realize is that if you abolish Section 230, like what you're saying is we want Twitter to not be able to remove this from trending. And they don't, it's complete nonsense. Nobody understands what they're talking about. They're just using it to appeal to a demographic that trusts what they say for better. Well, not for better, for worse, for absolute definite worse.
Well, I mean, do you think anything will come of it?
It's hard to say. A lot of it's going to depend on the election that happens. But here's the thing: is the Democrats aren't much better than the Republicans.
Yeah, I know Joe Biden was talking about reforming Section 232.
I don't think that they understand it any better than than the Republicans do. You had that bill. I forget who introduced it the other week about algorithms, about, when algorithms violate civil rights and stuff. And, I've heard arguments about how that could potentially work, but also I'm pretty sure that the person who wrote that just really doesn't fucking get it. And, if we could take all of the members of Congress and give them a week crash course on the history and the application of Section 230, maybe we'd get somewhere. But for now, I'm pretty convinced that whatever happens, any legislative solution that is reached is going to be horrible. It's going to suck. Yeah, either that or it's going to be completely toothless, and it'll be a symbolic, see, look, we did something without actually doing anything, which is, one of those old-time favorites of Congress.
A non-binding resolution expressing the sense of Congress. Well,
or a law that just changes 4 words, and they don't get that it really actually doesn't change anything. Which is entirely possible.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's the worst of it. I know that folks I think his name is Mike Cernovich, were attacking Jim Jordan for, on the one hand, braying very loudly about how these social media companies need to be brought to heel, and yet more quietly saying, look, we're not really going to punish success with these big companies. This is just... we just want to stop bias, but we're not really interested in. And I know, the base seems to want that red meat.
There's a lot of things you could attack Jim Jordan for, not least of which is the rampant sexual abuse that he oversaw at Ohio State. But that's a subject of a different time.
Yeah.
But that's exactly right, though, is a lot of these people are using it to rile up voters. They don't have any intention on actually doing anything. Yeah. That's kind of par for the course with people in election races, is you go rah 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 rah, this issue, that issue, and then you resolve to do jack shit.
Let me ask you a little bit about, I guess, the First Amendment generally.
Yeah.
Would you, something I've always been curious about is we have the most expansive, I think it's fair to say, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it seems like we in the United States are fortunate, at least for now, to have the most expansive protections of free speech in the entire world.
We are. Yeah. Absolutely.
I was reading just today that in Scotland they're talking about the prospect of new laws by which they will punish hate speech that is captured by Alexa in your home. And this is in a country that, is typically regarded as the mother of parliaments, in Britain. So it's even in ostensibly free countries, it's not even close. But at the same time, our First Amendment dates back to a time in which there were certainly standards of prohibition of objectionable material that are very different from what we have today. Certainly, anything prurient or sexual in nature. There's a lot of there's a lot more restriction on speech, right? This version of the First Amendment we enjoy today, while of course the text of it hasn't changed, the case law really dates back to the last century, at most. So,
I guess than that. We're talking, even in post, World War I, we were throwing people in jail for attacking the draft. So it's not even 100 years.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess what I'm curious about is the First Amendment today the product of the idea of a living constitution, or is there any way you could read it the way we read it today in an originalist fashion?
I'll say I'm not a fan of any one particular method of constitutional interpretation. I'm kind of one of those pull from different theories and you're going to get a better solution types. I wouldn't say that the First Amendment necessarily reflects a living constitution. I think it more reflects a heightened awareness of what valuable public discourse is. I don't think that you would find people that said just because the court, in the Debs case, or Holmes when he wrote that insipid fire in a crowded theater line that he regretted dearly by the end of it all. Just because they couldn't have foreseen all these things doesn't mean it's a living constitution. Judges, for better or for worse, sometimes they're a reactive. The Supreme Court's a reactive body, no question about that, and it applies those principles in a way that I don't think you would have found too many people saying some of the things you say now back in 1898, for instance, and you might have, but the fact of the matter is that I don't think you would find judges that say the principles have changed. I think maybe our understanding of expression and I think maybe even individualism. I think you could fairly say we're a more individualistic society than we were 100 years ago. Probably. I'm certainly no social philosopher, so don't quote me on that.
I get what you're saying. I'm just curious because I know, for example, in the lead up to the Civil War, Southern states were straight up banning, any material that has to do with abolition. No.
Oh yeah.
No, you can't do it. You can't do it. It's too insightful. Too much of a disaster.
I mean, I remember abolitionist materials. The Postmaster General of the United States declared them incendiary missiles intended to inflame our communities. I mean, that's what. Let's be clear. The First Amendment has not always inured to the benefit of people who need it the most. It's only through hard-fought battles. But at the end of the day, I think the best solution that we've got is to fight those battles to get to that place. Because, here's the thing. The difference from Plessy to Brown v. Board, or the difference from the early same-sex marriage cases to, striking down DOMA and Obergefell, the difference isn't a change in the law. The difference is a change in public opinion. And this is when I talk to people, especially when I talk to groups who have reason to maybe be a little bit wary of free speech and First Amendment principles, is the difference is that the second cases in those series came after public opinion had dramatically changed. And again, this speaks to the Supreme Court being a reactive body. If you want to make change, if you want social change, you have to convince people first. You can't do that unless you can talk about ideas that the majority might not want you to discuss. Because the majority is the one who controls what speech regulations are allowed if you don't have the First Amendment or don't have a strong First Amendment. And if you can't talk about abolition, you're not going to get to abolition. If you can't talk about school integration, you're not going to get to Brown versus Board of Education. You have to be able to talk about those things. And to bring this back maybe a tiny bit towards what's going on now with social media is, I mean, I get the frustration. And again, I don't think social media always does a good job. And I have been critical at times of the way that certain companies have done content moderation. And I think that it's fair to criticize that. And I think it's fair to say, hey, as a normative value, you should be allowing the most speech possible. Now, I'll still defend their right to moderate content the same as I would defend somebody's right to have a Klan rally, because, the First Amendment has to be adhered to. And if we start making those exceptions, there's no end to it. But I can still, while defending the Klan's right to have a rally, say the Klan is full of shit, they're wrong, and they're always going to be wrong. And so I will never tell somebody it's a terrible normative argument to say that Twitter should be allowing maximum free speech. That's an argument that can reasonably be made, and I sympathize with it, and I get it. Where I draw the line is bad faith, misstatements of the law, and attempting to force violations of the First Amendment by saying you have to host this speech that you don't want to host.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I tend to think about it when I'm arguing about it with people is it seems like if you were forcing somebody to host something they don't want to host, it seems like you're basically compelling them to speak. I mean, is that...
It is. It absolutely is. And it's an associational issue, too. You have the right to not associate with people you don't want to associate with. It implicates the First Amendment in a lot of big ways. And I mean, you ask people, the same people who make these arguments, do you think masterpiece cake shop owners should be forced to bake the cake. And well, then you get a whole other level of sometimes crazy discourse, but that's the fun of it. But the fact of the matter is they don't understand that it's tightly related.
What I really enjoyed, and I know we only have 5 minutes left, so I'll be brief here. What I really enjoyed,
I can actually push a little bit and go the full hour.
Oh, sure. Okay, that'd be great. What I really enjoyed, we can pivot to this issue then. What I really enjoyed when I was doing some background research on you was watching you on Tucker Carlson. It was very short. It was like 3 to 4 minutes.
I remember not getting much time to speak during that.
Yeah, it was very very fast. And I think he was more interested in which colleges are the worst with respect to free speech, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to the issue. And I was thinking, like, he was really, it sounded like he was really liking what you were saying, and I would be curious what he would have to say about your positions on recent, issues, like, because now, this guy's arguing that these platforms need to be, put through the ringer. But I guess to kind of switch gears a little bit, I know you've done a lot of research into campuses, college campuses that have been restricting freedom of expression. Why? Why does this matter? Like, shouldn't colleges be able to, decide who they want to platform and who they don't want to platform, same as the social media website?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I've gotten a couple of questions about it. Well, you spent all these years telling private college campuses that they should offer free speech. Why are you not telling Twitter? Yeah. And the difference is purpose and mission, I think. The ideals of free speech are so important on a college campus in terms of A, being able to actually educate students, and B, being able to prepare them to participate in broader civic society. And when a institution that proclaims to do that and says we value free inquiry and free expression because of its special nature, because of what it is there to do specifically and only, that I think warrants holding them to their promises a little bit more strongly. And to be clear, I don't think that private universities are beholden to the First Amendment. They're clearly not, just as Twitter isn't. But I think the normative argument is particularly strong. Here's the thing. We get all these students who never learn how to face ideas that they disagree with, never learn how to think critically, how to rationalize arguments, how to create counter arguments. Those are the people that are running the country next. If those people, that's how we end up with Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, sorry to say, is by having an ill-prepared, undereducated student body that doesn't really learn how to engage in honest, critical debate. And I have experiences that really taught me, the value in that. And I mean, it's just some of those experiences of debating people and really just going head to head and just tearing at each other's throats, the people I disagreed with in college, taught me a lot of really valuable lessons. And frankly, a lot of the people that I went at the hardest and who went at me the hardest we ended up actually being friends. And it was there were some of those experiences where you spend 3 years hating somebody because they stand opposed to everything that you think is good and right. And you have so much debate with them. And then, all of a sudden you end up going to get a beer together and you end up friends and you end up going to each other, going to a wedding. It's nice when it happens. It really teaches you. But, I've convinced people that their, bad take was wrong. And it's oftentimes taken a lot longer than I would have liked. And it's been through persistent doggedness. And, I have tons of stories about them, but it's so rewarding when that happens. And I think that everyone should experience that good faith, honest, critical debate, when you actually change someone's minds, it's a powerful moment. And I think it really teaches you the importance of the ability to talk with other people. And, I'm basically laying out the normative reasons why Twitter should try to allow maximum free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, that's why I'm sympathetic to the argument. And what I'm not sympathetic to is the way people are going about doing it.
I mean, disingenuously. I guess what I've been curious about was I was thinking that your response to my earlier question about platforms would be, well, now hold on. There's a difference. Twitter doesn't get any government money, as far as I know. Whereas a lot of these colleges get government money, and with that government money comes conditions, right?
Well, so the Supreme Court has actually held that receiving federal financial assistance for private colleges and universities does not subject them to the First Amendment.
Oh, wow! So that's like a 230 style carve out that allows them to operate in the way they see fit, right?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. I think it just goes to the nature, because private colleges get a lot of their money. It's not general funding. It's they get financial aid for students.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Grants and stuff like that. It's a little bit less entanglement with traditional roles of government, whereas a public university, I mean, I would say much more infrequently get direct funding, because we've been slashing university budgets for more than a decade in this country. Yeah. So, in reality, very little of their money comes from the government anymore. But, there's the whole what level of government funding and entanglement is sufficient to require a private entity to adhere to the First Amendment or any other constitutional provision is a little bit of a more complex legal question. Mm-hmm.
And is it? Do you think the situation has got better? I mean, I know that folks like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and folks of that sort really kind of cut their proverbial teeth arguing with college students. And I don't know, has speech on college campuses continued to narrow, or has it broadened?
I mean, I think it ebbs and flows. Yeah. There's cycles. When I was at FIRE, over the 6 years I was at FIRE, I saw the number of restrictive policies go down. That's not to say it was perfect, because more than half of public colleges still, or more than half of all colleges still had policies that substantially restricted free speech by the end of my time there. But, it got better policy-wise. But here's the thing, is the best policies in the world can still be misapplied. And the fact of the matter is that so many of these things aren't administrators saying, I want to restrict these kids' free speech. Administrators want there to be calm on campus. They want it to, they want things to be easy peasy. They don't want parents to be wondering what the fuck is going on with their kids. They want peace and quiet. And I think you're more likely to see censorship because of that than because of any actual, I don't like that ideology and I want to prevent students from, and to be sure that does happen. But I don't think that's the majority of the incidents. But, it does ebb and flow. And I do think that a lot of colleges and universities have become more sensitive to it. And I think there's reasons to be optimistic. But then again, you can go to FIRE's website right now and see the list of all the recent nonsense that is going. Like, there was the Haskell Indian Nation college the other day that I forget what they did for a student journalist, but I recall in the article their free expression policy was placeholder Latin text.
Literally lorem ipsum. Is there?
It was
wow.
Lorem ipsum. Like
God.
So it's like
I'm so lazy and incompetent.
There's always going to be nonsense that goes on, and FIRE is continuing to do great work. I still keep in contact with a lot of people there. And I think they're doing a bang up job still. I'm hopeful on college campuses, and that I try to let that make me hopeful for broader society.
Mm-hmm.
But, just every day I would scroll through Twitter and I say, you know what? We're doomed. We're all fucked.
Well,
come on, sweet meteor of death.
Well, I will say, I do sometimes wonder, like, I understand why I'm on Twitter, because I'm trying to, basically build this thing that I can then use to say, hey, check out my internet show. But I don't, a lot of people, I don't understand why they subject themselves to it. It depends, though, I guess, on what you're into. Right? Okay. Yeah, like, if you enjoy that. Right. I really enjoy your content on Twitter. It's a blast. What about I actually have, folks, if you have any questions, now's the time to get them in. I do have one here. From our very own Gundam, who asked, Bastiat, please ask your guest about protections afforded to satirical publications like The Onion or the Bastiat News Network, which is a news network that I'm unaffiliated with, but that they have used the pseudonym that I have taken from the original French economist to, they pretend like it's related to me, and it's very frustrating and annoying. And, they run a lot of hit pieces on Twitch streamers, and it looks really bad. How hard is it to sue these I like this question. How hard is it to sue these publications for defamation or libel?
So that's a tricky question. It's very fact specific, but parody and satire is absolutely protected by the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And if you're a public figure, which generally speaking, satirical publications aren't going after Joe Schmo down the block who's not a public figure. Yeah. Generally, they're going after, big name people who have made an oopsie in public recently. Mm-hmm. But it's a tough sell to sue them. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that being able to parody someone and criticize them via satire for something they did that affects matters of public concern, courts are going to protect that. You saw in Hustler versus Falwell back in the day when Hustler magazine published an ad, a Campari ad, that insinuated that Jerry Falwell lost his virginity to his own mother in a drunken outhouse escapade. Jerry Falwell, perhaps understandably, none too pleased.
Right, yeah.
But that was protected by the First Amendment, even though it was incredibly disrespectful. And the thing that you're going to get, I think, moving forward is maybe questions about whether something is clearly satirical, because Poe's law is becoming just ever more present in our daily lives, because sometimes people are just so fucking dumb that it's hard to tell whether they're being parodied or they're really just that stupid.
Sometimes,
that might end up being a question in the future.
The quality trolling is indistinguishable from, right?
God, tell me about it. I deal with it daily.
What do you think about anti-SLAPP laws designed to protect speech? SLAPP being an acronym for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. What do you feel like those laws are effective, or?
We need more of them, and we need a federal one.
So how do they work as they exist now on the state level?
So I'll take it back just one step.
Sure.
When you're talking about a SLAPP, a strategic lawsuit against public participation, you're usually dealing with a suit that the person bringing it doesn't expect to win. Mm-hmm. They just want to make it very expensive and very time-consuming for the person who said something they didn't like to continue saying the thing they didn't like. Mm-hmm. So SLAPP laws basically allow, because in the U.S., even if you win a lawsuit, you pay your own legal fees generally.
Right.
So if I win a defamation suit against me and it costs, me to $20,000 for my lawyer to do that, I'm out that $20,000 even though I won. Right. So what anti-SLAPP laws do is they usually provide a provision that at the beginning of the case, when a SLAPP is filed, you can file a special motion that halts the case and requires the plaintiff, the person bringing the lawsuit, to prove that they have a viable case. Mm-hmm. And if they can't, then generally speaking, there's a fee shifting provision that allows you to recover the cost of bringing that motion. So it's very effective, because if you're going to bring that lawsuit and it's bullshit and it's not arguable even, you're going to get charged for the legal fees that it costs to defend against it. And And we are seeing more than ever, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't done real research on that yet. It's actually one of the things I'm in the process of conceptualizing. Political candidates and office holders suing for defamation more and more and more.
Really? I mean, I've seen President Trump do that, but I mean,
you've got the fucking Devin Cow lawsuits.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that. I was, when you see President Trump do something, you're tempted to go, well, whatever. But like other politicians, I didn't know they were doing that.
They're doing that, and actually a lot of times what they're doing now is they're doing it against their opponents.
Wow.
So the fact of the matter is we're seeing a lot of these lawsuits, and what they're doing, Devin Nunes, what he did is he went to Virginia, which didn't have a huge, they didn't have any anti-SLAPP law at the time, really. He's forum shopping. He's filing a lawsuit in a place where he thinks that he can win, or he at least won't be subject to an anti-SLAPP law. And the thing is, in federal court, if, say you sue in New York, which does have a new anti-SLAPP law, and they had an old one, it wasn't very good. If you file in New York federal court because, say, you and the defendant are in two different states, federal courts in most places that are not California won't apply state anti-SLAPP laws in federal court because it's more of a procedural law, and in federal court, federal procedure is applied. So we need a federal anti-SLAPP law to kind of more uniformly protect against forum shopping and against the unavailability of anti-SLAPP laws in federal court. So it's important. We need to really get on legislators about that, both at the state and the federal level, because there are still some states that don't have any anti-SLAPP law, and those are going to be targeted by people who file bogus lawsuits.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. I know that the federal government, I don't remember the name of the law. I think it was called literally the Speech Act or something like that, where to prevent international forum shopping, the old Tom Cruise on South Park joke, I'll sue you in England, right? Right. So we've done that internationally, it sounds like.
Right. Now you can't enforce a foreign libel judgment if that country or that court didn't apply standards that it would at least protect as much speech as the First Amendment.
I mean, that seems like probably that just means you can't enforce a foreign libel judgment. Right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very, very difficult to enforce a foreign libel judgment in the United States, and I think properly so.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good step forward. But now we need
still
to
got this
protect
problem domestically.
our own people.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let me ask you one more question here from our wonderful audience. Is there a line for pro-terrorist content, like ISIS websites and things like that? How are lines between what is acceptable under the law and what is not drawn with respect to that kind of extremist content? And I figure this can get kind of gray because, incitement to violence, I suppose, when you're dealing with terrorism can be a very... it can be a broad question. So how, can ISIS really just run a website and run a Twitter account and just get away with that?
Well, so there's, it's a complicated question.
Yeah.
You're generally not going to get the incitement standard. It's generally not what you're going to be hit under, because the incitement standard is basically allows the government to regulate and prohibit speech that is directed to inciting and likely to incite imminent lawless action. So it's a pretty tight standard. It has to be, there has to be purpose, there has to be likelihood, and it has to be immediate. Hess versus Indiana, the Supreme Court said a protester screaming, "We'll take the fucking streets later," isn't good enough, because it said later, just indeterminate amount of time.
Right.
Where you're going to get into problems with terrorism is, the statutes about providing aid to foreign terrorist organizations and stuff like that. And there's some bad law out there about it. And that's a difficult and complicated question that without facts, it's really hard to say in a way that I don't kind of maybe fuck it up.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I guess the reason I was curious, and I think you've maybe hit on this to close it out, is that unlike normal speech, there are a lot of laws that get into providing aid and comfort to the enemy, in essence, and that complicates it, because at that point, that could be a pretty wide.
Yeah, but it's also important to remember that providing aid and comfort to the enemy isn't equivalent to saying, I think ISIS is, if I went on Twitter and typed out, I think ISIS is doing a great job.
Yeah.
You can't prosecute me for that. That's not real. That's not what it means, because that would sweep so much speech into it that you can, it would outlaw certain advocacy potentially. And obviously I would never tweet such a stupid thing, but there's certainly people out there dumb enough to do it.
True enough. All right, so our hour is up. Man, I so much I still want to talk about, but I really do appreciate your time. I
come back anytime.
That'd be fantastic. I was just about to ask. I hope you had a good time. Thank you so much, Ari Cohn, ladies and gentlemen. We'll drop a link to his Twitter account. I think you'll really enjoy following this fella.
Famous last words.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time, for spending an hour with us, answering our wonderful questions, and for further empowering the hit pieces that the Bastiat News Network will be slinging my way real soon. All right. So thank you so much, and I look forward to talking again soon.
Definitely. Take care.